Portrait of a tree, which almost standing central, maybe a little bit more on the left-hand side. Some beautiful branches done. Reasonably simple background. We're mainly focusing on this tree and its texture. So we're going to have a lot of experiments today, loads of practical kind of little trials. There's not much color mixing going on because the colors are quite muted, but we're going to throw some extra things color-wise just to experiment with it as well. So it's texture, 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 and very close to each other color today. I've chosen a very elongated format today. So I'm going to have a quick sketch of the planning of how my design of the painting could be done. So I'm going to have a tiny bit of composition planning. So first of all, my let me just measure it. Height of the painting, of height of the photograph at least, is going to be folding almost twice as long. Yeah, the height of it almost fits twice within its length. Not quite twice, but very, very elongated. So if I'll measure this one here, so it's need to fit in once, twice, maybe a tiny bit shorter, maybe somewhere here. Okay, that gives me an idea how long it's going to be. And I'm going to move my tree slightly on the left from the center. Okay, maybe a little bit wider. And it also has a wider kind of top end. Okay, got a real nice character. I really want you to create the character for the trees today. The portrait, we're really doing the portrait of a tree. Now for my sketch here, all I'm going to do, I'm just going to shade it all together so it's dark. And we're going to have some exciting branches. Now if we'll sketch the branches perfectly, we might lose the quirkiness of the tree. Yeah, I would prefer if we give some of the branches a bit more direction, but we're actually going to create that character with branches with a brush or with some other tools I'm going to introduce. So some of them are going to go up, some of them are going to go down. I'm going to just try to work out so they're not going to be all parallel to each other or cluttered too close together. Yeah, maybe slightly busy on one side, maybe deliberately keeping it a bit more calmer, maybe not as many deliberately done on other side. Yeah, maybe there will be something supported from the background. Maybe if this side is going to stay a little bit more busy. Okay, so that's might be my overall plan for the tree. Now for the landscape behind it, I'm going to have it much more calmer in color. There's a big river behind there, big wide space. To be honest, it doesn't matter what it is. We just want to create some space, like this tree standing somewhere quite high up. So we're going to have low horizon. That will immediately help us identify that it's quite high. Going to keep the rest of the sky. The sky is going to be quite pale, but within the low area, we're going to have something a little bit lighter in the center, like this, roughly. Okay, I've just almost drawn a box for it, but it's not going to be quite the box, but it's going to be roughly that area. And something around this area is going to be darker because of the trees, because of the bushes, because of the kind of the tops of the trees there, because of the horizon, or there is a bridge there. It doesn't matter. We're not going to work into those details. That's going to be overall our layout. So we're going to combine the two. So we'll have practice for the wash for the back, at the back. We'll have a practice how to do the bark of the tree, and we'll have a practice how to do the branches, and then we'll put everything together. Okay, so that will be the plan. Let's start with a drawing. Let me photograph all this together, and then we'll do a position. I'll start with the, right, let me just actually adjust my masking tape here at the bottom, because I spotted it's not quite straight, because it's quite a narrow layout of the paper. I need to make sure that all the angles are good, so nothing is going to be done sideways. That's why it looks like on the screen it looks like that way, because my paper's gone diagonally. Okay, that's why it felt a bit odd. Okay, that's all good. So lower part of the painting is going to have the horizon. Okay, so that is going to be somewhere there, probably a third into our paper. Okay, let's remove all the extra lines. Okay, and the trees. So if I identify where is going to be roughly my halfway through line for the tree is going to be, so that's a big box, big shape for the tree. And let's find its curvature, a little bit more of character to it. So on the right hand side, there's something even coming out. Got nice quirky edge. There is a big bulge, or for the branch, maybe a wider, bigger branch might have been growing there, which might have been trimmed, not allowed to grow. Okay, and the tree goes more inwards. Another side is still from wider part to narrower one. There's again a nice big, maybe it was a group of branches growing constantly year after year. That section actually could go even lower, and then it goes inwards, another little bulge, and again maybe going somewhere inwards again. Now, does it gives it enough character to my tree? Maybe not as much as I want to. Maybe let's get it a little bit more sharper, maybe a bit more exaggerated. I just need to have a look for those shapes, and I'm going to do the same. Maybe keep this one a bit shorter. Okay. Okay, that's maybe parallel, but maybe I can drop this one lower. Let's keep it a little bit more of a, that's better. That looks a little bit more exciting. Maybe extra something out. I want maybe bending it tiny bit more that way. Just create a bit more character. It doesn't look like a straight, perfect kind of too straight, too mechanical, too even. Okay, that's better. Got some sort of curve to it. Okay, curvature to it. Now this big bulge of the tree is going to have a bit more depth to it. So as an overall shadow. So if I'll look for where my lightest parts on the shadow or on the bark are going to be, so if I'll identify them with big strokes, where in the center it's going to be the lightest areas, maybe something like that. So that will stay as a shadow, that will stay the shadow, maybe a tiny bit of that will stay as a little highlight in comparison to the two dark tones. Quite difficult to see it, but it is there. And then there is a shape again of the branch coming towards us. So that's interesting, not where some of the branches will be coming out. Maybe a shadow from it, or be some extra textures coming out from it, but we can work with that a bit more later. Maybe that could have some extra bites, and we'll have the branches will be a bit heavier. Okay, that's good. So nice big shapes, big quirky lines. I quite like sculpting out big shapes for the tree. Yeah, big extra blocks. Maybe bring it a little bit more forward. Okay. And let's have a look at some of the main branches. Right, so there's a big key one going out this way, so maybe it needs to be dropped a bit lower. So I'm not going to draw them all, but I'm interested in some character and in some directions. So I quite like this corner, so I think I'm going to go for it more or less as it is on a photograph. The rest of the branches, I'm just going to do it some direction. My main pointers are not to make the direction of the branches parallel to each other and make them varied. So when I'm working with a brush, I already have an idea of what's going to happen to them. So if any of the lines are too parallel, too similar, I can solve it now. Okay, so maybe this could go a tiny bit lower. And that, I quite like that angle. Maybe even, no, if I'll keep it the same way for now, because there is another branch coming out this way, and it balances the one above out. Okay. There's another one coming out this way. I'm going to try to again vary the widths, or which branches are going to be a bit more wider and more important, and which one's going to be a little bit more settled and slender, settled in the environment, I mean. Okay, not as protruding. Good, I think so. I'm probably going to stick with those 4 and toward the top for now. And maybe another 4 on other side, but slightly more lighter in weight. Okay, maybe some sub branch. Sub branch to that one as well. Right, so on the right hand side, I'm going to have a direction going down. I might actually exaggerate that direction. We have the diagonal approach on the left hand side with this branch, and this top branch might just support it a little. Okay, I think that will be a better one. So I'm going to try to have all the branches going tiny bit more, heaviest going to be tiny bit more diagonally across from the left corner to the right corner. I think that's my vision here. So I'm going to deliberately change some of their direction here. Those ones are going to come out together, but they're going to separate and split, and we'll have sub branches all over the place later on. So those are my main 4 branches on the right hand side. Those two a little bit more together, and then they split. There's another one coming through. It's coming out somewhere lower and goes down, but I think I want to bring it a little bit higher and then give that diagonal a little bit more extra shape. Nice quirky tree. And again, the rest of the branches will be coming out outwards. We'll work with them a bit more freer. Can see another branch coming out. Let me just see if I can place. It just comes out from somewhere from the top on the right hand side. Maybe just will join it with its weight. Again, it gives us a bit more volume. That the tree's tall. We only see a section of it. I think actually that might be a good point as well. Now the branches at the bottom from the other trees, we'll need to make sure they will stay much paler, although on the photograph they do appear quite dark, but those ones. So we need to make sure they're not competing with our main branches. So we connected the branches to the right and left hand side. Let's have a look at some of the branches we actually travel further into the tree bark. So for example, there is one of the branches on the left hand side, traveling a little bit more further in.
Has everyone else lost Julia?
Yeah. We're just working into the branches here.
Yes, I've lost her as well.
Mm.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
we're
I have.
back.
Yes,
Now so she's coming back.
Oh.
I'm back. I'm back.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good.
Okay, brilliant.
I've lost you now. Where are you?
Okay, have you got me now?
Yeah.
Okay, lovely.
Yes, we have. Yes,
So-
got it now. Yeah.
Okay. So how it's gonna have a nice curve and maybe gonna look up a bit, maybe even higher actually. Give it a bit more of a character and maybe gently supported by maybe another branch going out. There are other branches there, but I don't think they will be supporting it as much. So I think I quite like that curvature here. And again, because there are loads of light and dark tones, I'm going to keep my branches light. Just make sure that I'll maybe rub out some of the darker tones which are behind, just not to confuse myself, or just allow my paints to stay light here. Okay. And I'm ready to start painting. So I'm going to take a smaller piece of watercolor paper, and I'm probably gonna just do just a quick kind of breakdown on what we're actually going to be doing on that wash. Okay. If I'll put it a little higher somehow. Okay, that's better. So our background, let's have something pale, for example, like indigo for the sky, but really diluted indigo. And I'm also interested into some of those sepias and maybe a hint of violet and ochre for the browns at the back of the piece as well. Right, I think I'm going to just move this one a little bit more across so I can sample some colors here as well. So I'll use a flat brush just to test some of the colors, just to place them and sample first. So indigo, let's find indigo. If you don't have indigo, it's one of your blues and black. So this is my kind of stronger indigo, but actually I will need something paler version of it. Okay, something very pale here like this. Looking at this as I'm testing it, I think if I'll add a hint of violet to my indigo, that color might be also varied because it's a large area of sky. I don't want to paint it all together. So if I have a hint of violet with my indigo together, okay, so something maybe like that in color, but it's way too dark. So this is just for us to see the color. And let's dilute it and sample it as the possible color, possible darkness we want. So something maybe like that as well would be great. So I just diluted that color in here. Again, I might just keep them tiny bit darker so you can see them. But for the actual painting, we're going to be just working with off-whites for the sky. Okay. Also, to create a bit more atmosphere, this is all I'm thinking about the sky. My tree, I'm planning to have my tree bark something warmer in the center and cooler on the edges. If big shadows of the tree are going to have cooler edges, it means I need to bring some sort of warmth to the background close to the tree. So my quick alternative to just the two cool colors might be my light orangey color. So that's the strong color. But if I dilute it, So that's maybe my other version kind of possible colors I'm going to be using for it. So that's my thinking process, how those colors could be blending together. Okay, and then for the background, sorry, for the lower part of the painting, probably similar of those colors for the water especially, and then I'll add sepia, and the sepia could be, again, maybe it's not going to be diluted as much, but it could have a paler version of it. Okay, in places. And I think if I mix sepia with indigo, okay, if I mix those two together, that will give me a darker browny color. I think that will be quite nice as well for some of the trees. Okay, or if I mix my sepia with some violet, okay, so let's have a look what's going to happen there. That will be a nice type of browny color as well. Just move this one across, so I have a bit more space to add my colors. So sepia and violet, sepia and indigo. That's just sepia on its own. Okay, that's orange or golden if you're using Russian paints. Indigo for both of these ones, and that was indigo and violet. Okay, for those two. Okay. I think those are going to be my main colors. I can use the orange with any of those colors as well. So let's see if we can mix sepia and orange. We'll give it much more bolder, stronger orangey type of brown. Okay. Got cooler brown, a bit more, still cooler, kind of in between cooler redder brown with a violet, and then we've got much more orangey brown there as well. Okay. So here is the plan. Okay, let's put orange sepia. Orange. So here is the plan. We're going to have for the sky. Okay, these are going to be our sky colors. Okay. And this is the lower part of the landscape. Okay, and the trees below the branches.
Julia, can I
Hello.
just ask you, when you put violet and sepia, I'm just wondering, although I've got the Russian paints, my sepia and violet never come out as red and orange as yours. You haven't got it's just a standard violet you've got, isn't it?
Yes, yes, I do. Are you using, is it more of a violet or more of a purple?
No, it's the violet from the Russian colour.
Right. So if I'll put my tree roughly where it's going to be, just as a box, okay, I'm not too interested in the shape of it there. Then I can go with my big brush, even for a small piece of sampling paper, with a big brush, because I'm going to pick up a even larger brush for my actual painting. So these are the three colors I'm going to use. Diluted golden or orange color is going to come close to the edge of the tree. And then the probably cooler color I'm going to put close to the horizon, kind of soften it. And then maybe violety indigo is going to come above. Okay, so I planned it. I'm going to start from the top. So what do I need at the top? Indigo and violet. Let's mix that color. Maybe it's a good idea if you just watch me for a moment. I'll do probably the whole background because it's a small area and needs to be done in one go. And then you can give it a go yourself. So indigo and violet, and I need to dilute them pale enough to stay nice and plain. Okay, on a larger format, what we'll do, we'll paint the paper with some water. This is quite a small area. If we put too much water, everything's just going to disappear. So I'm going to deliberately maybe even exaggerate the darkness of the colors so we can see where they're going to go. Okay, so that's my violet indigo color. Then I'm going to put my orange or golden color. I'm mixing it immediately with my indigo here, so just to have a bit more warmth to the background. Okay, so something close here, maybe somewhere across there, and whatever is left is going to be just diluted indigo. And we're still talking about the lower part of the background having different colors for the bottom there. Okay, so some maybe something here. Okay, let's accentuate the center of the tree. That's yellowy kind of orangey color, brings the whole focus towards that tree. And then for the background, so for the lower section, I'm gonna go for I think that same violety indigo for the water, whatever that light color is. And the rest I'm going to go for some sepia and violet, or sepia and orange. Just dab your colors in and just see how they will start. Maybe warmer colors more at the front and a little bit more calmer, cooler colors at the back. So that's my initial planning here. While the paper is wet, I will also bring some of the darker branches for the foreground. So I'm mixing some sepia and violet, and I'll have some of the shapes quite soft. They're going to be reasonably pale here. And maybe sepia and orange on the other side. Okay, something there. So they're going to stay soft. I'm not going to be painting them too precise. If part of my horizon is disappearing there, that's okay. I don't want it to be sharp. Okay. And then the tree branches on the left hand side, sorry, on the right hand side, right in the corner, going to have a bit more coolness to them. So I'm going to go for some of these colors, sepia and indigo, and they might be just something there. Again, this is my plan of colors. I want to keep this a bit more pale but present. I think that will be my sketch for the background. it's dividing the piece into sections for the background gives me a much more control of how much water am I putting, what colors am I using, and so forth. Okay. So if I'll put my little sketch here, because I'm going to start on the left hand side, let's put some water on the sky. Now, hopefully you all have quite a low angle, shallow angle for your boards, so the paint is not going to run. It will settle in beautifully. Okay, so I'm just painting this sky with some water, going over the edge of the tree, just double checking there's no dry areas. And while it's still wet, I'm going to use a medium flat brush. I'm going to start with indigo and violet together. I'm going to dilute them quite pale. I can also check it on my paper if it's going to be the same. Remember, when I start putting it on my little sketch, it's looked quite dark, but by the time it's dried, it looks very pale. So increased amount of darkness is okay, not panicking about it. And I'm going to put now golden or the orange, diluting it again. Let's bring it quite strongly. We need to put it a little bit over the tree bark, it's okay as well. Okay, let's see how the colors are merging. And at the bottom part of the sky, I'm going to have some diluted indigo. So a bit of indigo, diluting it. I would prefer if some of these paler colors are a little bit exaggerated in darkness, because they will be standing out against very dark silhouettes. Right, and at the bottom, to be honest, while we've got the bottom part and I don't want to have a sharp edge, I think I'm going to keep going. I'm going to get some indigo and violet, same colors I just used in the top, right in the center. This is a small area, so I didn't make it wet, but you could have painted it all wet. I probably will do it on the other side because the other side is darker. And I'm going to go for sepia and violet for the background. If it's all runs, it's all runs. My board is a little bit higher, standing up, a little bit more upright. And at the bottom, I'm going to have orange and sepia. Okay, this is all staying quite damp. At this stage, I need to double check that there is no sharp edges on any of my tree segments. Or if I want to keep any of the branches pale, I think maybe the bottom one here, because they might be a tiny bit paler, or at least I don't know, I just lifted a tiny bit of color off. Okay, something happened there. Now that I want to have some fresher blue there. Maybe just introducing a tiny bit of fresher blue there, but it doesn't have to be. That's all nice and soft, nice and gentle. It's everything is just an idea of what it could be. It's not too bold or too strong to compete with our tree. Okay, this edge is softened again. As my colors are settling in on the bottom part of the painting, I want to make some of the branches at the bottom tiny bit more visible as details. So I'm using sepia and violet just to introduce tiny bit of a possible shapes of the extra branches maybe coming from underneath. If your paper is still wet, you might need to wait for it to dry. I'm just going to give it a tiny bit of a hint. I think it's still quite wet as well for me here. That might be enough. Best to do less than too much. We can always increase the darkness, we can always increase the texture, so paler versions of it are better versions, and we'll see how that dries. Right, let's do the other side of the painting now. So it's a large area. I'm going to use clean water and big brush. I'm going to repeat the process by painting the whole area with some water, going further a little bit more into the tree. And I'm painting the bottom part of the landscape as well. It's a large area, so it's very easy to miss sections. So I'll go a couple of times over just in case. It's also soften, kind of makes the whole paper absorb the water. Okay. And then I'll start working with similar colors. Don't be scared of exaggerating the color because it will get lighter when it dries. Plus, by the time we painted the paper with water, that water will dilute the colors we introduced to the paper. So my first color is going to be indigo and violet. I'm going to give it maybe a little bit of a diagonal there. And I'm going to go now for golden or orange color. I'll begin exaggerating it, especially further away. I think I'm going to exaggerate it extra. And then soften it maybe towards the tree bark. Yeah, it just goes a little bit up and down. Okay, maybe that will be quite a nice, strong. Actually, I wanted to keep it paler, but I quite like it strong now, so I think I'm going to keep it there. And then the bottom part is just indigo. Okay. So it'll be a nice contrast with the violety blue at the top to a cooler indigo at the bottom. And again, the horizon is going to be something sepia with violet. Okay, so something a bit more cooler, heavier, maybe further away, towards the right, towards the border, because we're going to have a heavy tree there. Okay, so if it's all running, it's fine. I'm going to go now for indigo, diluted indigo, for the water here. Again, don't be scared of it in tiny bit more darker tone. It will soften, it will become very, very pale. And at the front, I'm going to go for sepia and orange. A bit more stronger by the tree here. Probably going to have a nice cool shadow here. So stronger orangey browns will be quite nice. I might even put them tiny bit more higher. If you add in a stronger color, don't add extra water on your brush, otherwise it will just all run. So just introduce it a little bit more bolder. Right, I quite like that color. I think I might bring it a little bit back here on the right as well, just to keep it similar. And on the left hand side, I'm going to go for indigo and sepia. So a slightly cooler color. Okay, maybe something there. And just keep it plain. I think I quite like the softness of the orange and sepia here, so I think I'm going to keep my indigo and sepia a little bit less important. Something there, but it's not telling too much details. So let's now explore the color for the tree, and we'll put some of the colors together on spare paper, and then we'll paint it, and then we'll experiment with branches. Okay. So our tree looks quite dull on the photograph, but let's make it exciting. I think I'm going to go for very similar colors to what we were using here, but I'll start exaggerating them and bringing them a little bit more bolder. I'll probably also introduce a small amount of reds, maybe carmine or crimson or anything pinky type of red, or if you have got purples, any of those colors thrown together with the browns, violets, bit of indigo, orange. Okay. So I'm also interested in creating some warmer colors for the central part of the tree and some cooler ones for the edges. So let's just grab some of those colors together. Orange and sepia. I'm just going to mix them even together here straight away. Okay. Or maybe just a little bit more fresher orangey sepia colors. Let's mix small amount of red to it, because that's the type of technique we'll be mixing together. Yeah, we'll be kind of putting the colors almost on the paper immediately. Okay, a bit more sepia here, a little bit more violet, mixing it all together. Yeah, creating some nice textures for them, for the bark. The fresher we're going to keep the colors, the less we're going to mingle them. Yeah, so mixing them together is good, but if I'll keep going back now into those colors, that's all becomes less fresh and exciting. Okay, maybe a bit more pinky orangey color. Yeah, so that will be something type of my warmth of the colors. So orange, sepia, violet, any pinky reds or purples, all mingled up together. And I applied them kind of into bark type of texture. Yeah, where some strokes come in a bit more wider, some narrower, coming of kind of scooping strokes they're coming across. So that might be a pattern we're developing. And for the shadows, we'll use indigo with sepia, indigo maybe a little bit more on its own, indigo and violet. Okay, some of those colors. So they're appearing tiny bit more darker on the screen, but they will dry paler. So some of the shadows we'll need to make very, very dark. They're almost black like. We can always top them up as well when if they dry too light, but those are going to be our shapes. What we'll also do, what we'll watch out for the shadows, if we need to leave out any spaces for branches while the shadow is still wet, we can use the clean brush, damp brush, and wipe some of the branches spaces out so we can reintroduce a fresher color across. Yeah, well, this is something I'll be doing. I think this area is probably all drying out, but so the quicker you reintroduce, if you need to lift any colors off, that will be the technique we'll use. Let's give it a go. So I'll start with all the lighter sections of the tree. So all the central part of the tree. I'll work, because it's quite a lot of, it's a reasonably small area for a size of the brush like this. So I'm not going to make it wet. If you know, you tend to not put enough moisture when you start painting, maybe a good suggestion would be to wet the surface first, like we were doing the background, so the colors will be blending. If you're not very quick changing the colors from one to another. Okay. Right, so I'm gonna start with orange and sepia. Orange and sepia. Let's have a look. Those two colors together. Tiny bit more orange too. I'm gonna use the side strokes of the brush just to create a little bit more texture. Let's bring it a tiny bit more across. Now, don't want the edges of the shapes dry very sharp, because I haven't decided how I'm going to overlap them. So I'm immediately softening the left and the right edges. Now I'm going to go for some sepia and a hint of violet. Okay, maybe something here. Okay, maybe not as dark. Maybe I just soften it a bit more with extra water. What about if I add to all of this a bit more red? Okay, maybe a tiny bit more orange somewhere here. So I'm just throwing all these colors at me. I'm exaggerating them. I'm gonna make it still a tiny bit more darker with the violet. So that's maybe run, maybe create me extra texture. I'm going to paint over the branches, but on the top of my front kind of central branch, I'm just going to add a little bit of extra orange just in case it will give me extra warmth here. And on the bottom, I'm going to go for more sepia and violet, still reasonably warm in color. Okay, somewhere across there. And again, left and right edges, immediately I'm going to soften with some water. If they do dry, it's not too big deal, because it's a tree. We're going to have loads of texture. Okay, let's soften there as well. Let it run as well. And not to forget to lift some of the branches. I think this is the key one for me here. This central one. I can decide if I'll introduce some stronger, tiny bit darker color, but might just give me a little bit of depth by the time I'll start painting darker colors around. If I wanted to create any extra textures of the bark, right, I think that would be way too light, so maybe not a good idea. Let's cover it up, maybe with the opposite, maybe with some extra texture of dark. So while my surface is a little bit more damp, it's not super runny, but it is damp, I can bring small amounts of texture, maybe across. If you're in doubt, if you start putting a couple of strokes and they look too runny, stop and wait for the surface to dry more think I can do a little bit more here. That's nice running here as well. And I'm ready to start working into the shadows. Again, I'm going to use the same big brush. And our shadows had indigo with sienna and indigo with some violet. So indigo, maybe this area we said might have a tiny bit more light in it in the shadow. So that might be something indigo, sorry, violet and sienna. And let's start adding some indigo around it. Now, the edge of my tree now is going to be playing a crucial part. So if I want to have a nice silhouette, I need to be careful with my strokes, not to go too far or to go too too short. Well, usually not going too far out of your spaces. Okay, let's do some of that here. Maybe some texture. Okay, the branch is going to come in here. I can or avoid them or lift it. Okay. Probably lifting will be more natural looking. Some more indigo and violet. See how some of that texture might just, if I just use the side of the brush, maybe paint between the branches. Okay, well, I've done that side. I need to lift some of these branches, not to forget about them. And also this one, just making sure that my brush is flat. Okay. There are loads of very soft textures. We can come back and sharpen them. But I'm going to go for the other side now of the tree, repeating similar colors and just merging them from one to another. So that's sepia and violet. Maybe a starting point as a slightly lighter version on a corner. And then I want to introduce strong indigo, maybe in sepia, or maybe just indigo on its own. It will merge with our colors anyway. Let's create a nice silhouette here for the tree bark. If some of the colors start to appear very similar, I can bring in a stronger color, for example, some red and sepia, and I'm just going to make it, just introduce it with extra water, and it will create a runny, softer texture, which will drag across and create a little bit of lighter space, so it doesn't look too solid shadow. And then I can work down and again keep bringing maybe a little bit more sepia and violet, maybe a little bit more sepia on its own, maybe a little bit more indigo. The edge on the left hand side, I'm going to try to preserve more creative. When the edge bordering with the sky, I can just keep as a silhouette. Okay. When we're working with darker colors, try not to bring too much moisture, otherwise everything's going to just run. I don't think I've got any branches I want to come across the bark on this side, so I'll keep it as it is. And I'll just introduce extra shadows, the branch here at the front. And maybe a bit more creative shadow here as well. Don't want any too perfect edges for the shadows. They need to be a little bit more natural. Very tempting to do loads of extra textures now on this tree, but I'll have to wait for it to dry to see how the build-up of the tones settles. Otherwise, it's difficult to make the final decisions here. It might overwhelm the amount of texture, the amount of darkness. If today we're painting a portrait of a tree, in a similar way, you can paint a portrait of a flower, or of a specific object, let's say a vase with some flowers, or maybe just a vase, and maybe part of the garden furniture, or rock, or there might be all sorts of things painted in a similar way. How we can focus on certain elements and make it very powerful and standing out and full of character, and keeping the background less important and just supporting that object. Kind of look for those type of characteristic within the painting. Also, this kind of approach used quite a lot for other type of paintings where maybe there are much more details, but there might be an element standing out much more bold and sharper, still taking that focal point. Okay, so that's the key for today. Focal point, character building, without introducing too much little details. Yeah, so when we painted that tree, we worked for big bold colors without working into tiny little things. We'll add some small details, but not huge amount of them. Right, are we ready for some branches painting? And some bark.
Julia, can I just double check as well? On the darker bits and the shadows, it was indigo and sienna, not burnt sienna, yeah?
Yeah. And some violet as well.
Thank you.
Sienna and violet, or sienna and indigo, and then violet with any of those two colors. So 3 colors. Sienna, indigo, violet, any combinations of them. Now, for the extra textures, I'm going to use similar colors we've used, but I'm going to pre-mix them on my palette. So I have a pool of colors here, maybe a little bit more sienna, a little bit more violet, a little bit more indigo, any of those ones kind of available to me. And I'm going to dip my little wooden wedge, or you could use the back of the brush or a little tissue, sometimes it's good. Let's try them all. Palette knife as well. So I'm going to practice maybe just bringing some of that texture across the bark. Yeah, maybe this will be something. Dragging, cutting into, yeah. Maybe introducing a little bit more darker, maybe a bit more settled. Yeah, if you don't like something or don't like some things, you know, maybe one of the edges, if it's too sharp, you You can use a brush and maybe just soften it with a little bit of water, so it just blends more into a shape rather than staying very bold. Okay, so it's found and lost edges for the bark. If you were to use a little bit of tissue, you can use the same thing. If you just fold the tissue, so you've got a quite sharp, solid ridge to it, and again you just dip into your paper tap, into your maybe just a little bit more solid paint, into your pool of water with some paint, but a little bit stronger maybe, because the tissue will be absorbing loads of it, and you can just draw with that tissue as well. Yeah, so as successfully as if you were drawing with a little wooden wedge. Okay, so let's give it a try a little bit on our bark, tree bark. So again, less is more. I'm going to start maybe somewhere on the edges of the lights. And also I'm going to try to look for variety. If some of the lines will start becoming too similar, I'll go immediately maybe soften them, blend them with the existing color. Give yourself a bit more freedom, give yourself a little bit more creative exploration. Don't be too scared that you might do odd shapes before fixing them, before trying to amend things. Maybe let them dry. Look for different diagonals or different directions of the strokes. Most importantly, different shapes. Not too similar in size. Something lighter, something darker, something soft, something sharper. Okay, that sounds like a poem now. Okay. And I quite like using that tissue with a very dark indigo. Maybe I'll introduce some of that across the shadow on the left. Again, I'll have to see how it dries before able to identify if it's enough or not too much. I'm going to take that creative risk. Just be careful not to over smudge and not overwork the paper if you're using a tissue, because that will be like a sponge sometimes, working to creating a little bit too extra, kind of rubbing off the paper too much. So possibly rotating the tissue and having a fresher end for it. Okay, that's exciting. I might stop at that for the moment. So if I'm holding the brush at the end, it might give me a bit more space, yeah, to kind of decide how free my line is going to be. However, I like using my round brush for branches. If I drag it forward or backwards, let's say if I drag my brush forward, okay, might give me an extra, yeah, much more spontaneous marks. So I don't, it's much more natural. Or if I'm bringing the brush backwards, dragging it, yeah, it gives much more kind of straighter lines, if that makes sense. Okay, so instead of just drawing it as normal, try to drag the brush backwards or forwards. But that's for the round brushes, not for the flat ones. Flat ones just go sideways. Okay, so that's another option. Right, if I were to use a squirrel brush, I'll probably use it for lighter colors, for lighter sections. So that's like the colors we mixed. A little bit of green and sienna, maybe sap green and sienna, or any other colors we use today with green, like a violet and green, a bit of ochre and green. Okay, so the squirrel brush again, that will be more of a point we'll be using there, yeah? And again, try to drag the brush forward without pressing too much, or try to drag the brush backwards, yeah? So maybe putting it a little bit more flat on the edge. Exciting strokes. Okay, sometimes the squirrel brush can give you some fine lines as well, but I would probably use it with a smaller round brush. It gives me definitely much more confidence in smaller details. So you can try as many brushes as you want. You can try very small ones. Sometimes tiny brushes actually make us more tentative. The branches are not as spontaneous then. Wooden wedge will give us perfect marks for extra shadows. So if I'll just dip it into my paint, and I'll go over some of my paler branches already, just to identify some extra marks. I can do a spontaneous kind of continuous line, maybe just pressing on the wooden wedge in a different way. Yeah, that will be a nice mark as well. The same as doing little junctions or little branches where the paint is almost drying. Yeah, you're just sketching with that. So I'd prefer you not to sketch too much with a brush for it, for our branches, but maybe with the wooden wedge if you've got one, or a piece of cloth, or a piece of kitchen towel. That would be exciting. So I made it a bit more shadows. So if I have something lighter or darker, or I can also vary what's cooler, what's warmer there as well. Now for palette knife, if you wanted to try to explore palette knife, that will be painting something, let's say, with flat brush, which will hold quite a lot of water. So let's say for some larger branches, again, try it here, you might not want to use it. So something wider, and then lifting some of that color or just dragging it out, maybe scratching part of the surface of the branch. That will give us some extra details as well. And again, we can top things up when there is a dry or semi-dry to create extra patterns. But palette knife, you can use it on the damper surface, but be extra careful. Practice it with it first. You might not even want to use it on your actual painting, but that's an option for us, okay? So we're ready to give it a go. I'll go for, actually, if I'll photograph it first here. So I'm going to start with my flat brush using sepia and sap green. And maybe, so that's going to be some of my warm colors, not warm colors, well, light colors. Okay, so I'll have some of my larger branches here. Okay, and do them quite wide here. I'm just following my lines here across, trying to create good line pattern. I can make them tiny bit wider because I will work with darker tones and the silhouettes of the tree, of the branches, will start looking thinner. Okay, so give yourself a little bit of leeway. If it's a bit, comes out a little bit wider, that's okay. But just most importantly, remember that the branch should be narrower, further away of the tree, further away from the tree, and a little bit more wider towards the tree. Otherwise, we'll start breaking. Okay, I think maybe a small amount of that light's gonna come here. Now we can vary this color as well by adding a small amount of orange color. I'm just going to use the same color for the branches on the right hand side. I quite like my flat brush for all this. Don't be scared of interrupting the branch. For example, here I just stopped and I've got a gap, so there might be light touching it up. It doesn't have to be a continuous line. Yeah, it could be a slightly broken branch in the sense of how the light is touching it. Yeah. Maybe this one will have a bit more light as well. And those two are going to split here. And the narrower branches will start appearing there as well. Right, so I'd like to add a little bit of orange to this color. Maybe even sepia and orange. Well, some of the branches are a little bit damp. I can just introduce gentle amount of that here. If that is already dry, it doesn't matter. I'll just put little knots of light maybe across. Even if it's gone a little bit too far, that's all good. I can also use this orangey sepia color for extra lighter branches. Maybe I'll be a bit more spontaneous and just use lighter lines, just in case if I don't like them. Also, they're more finer lines we're introducing now before I start doing any of my shadows. Okay, so I'm going to play with extra sub branches where they might be coming across. Try not to go for branches which go opposite direction. Sometimes it creates character, but be careful if you haven't planned them through, suddenly change the direction for the branches might be a bit more, might just take away the attention from what we're actually trying to do. Okay, something there. Little buds, little branches on kind of tiny sub branches are welcome as well at this stage. Very little, almost like Chinese happy dots, but maybe of longer shapes. Again, we can work into other shapes and sizes of the lines, but don't forget we will be building up darker tones as well. Okay, maybe that's enough for that area. Let's come back and do some more branch building this side. I think I'll work with the foreground here. By putting lighter branches gives me much more confidence in direction. So if I've done something wrong, it's pale, it's at the background, it's not as important, it's not as breaking up my composition. Yeah, maybe something there across as well. Don't want to put too many. Okay, so I'm happy with my pale colors. So I'm gonna go now for my little wooden wedge and start introducing some darker colors. So I'm gonna mix some sienna and violet together. I think that's the color I'm gonna go for first. And also I'm going to mix some indigo and sienna, and maybe just fresh indigo, just ready. So I can dip in and out of various colors, various darknesses. And I'll do it small amounts at a time. So let's say so darker color coming in, sketching with it, maybe putting little texture, tiny bit of the knots on the branches, small amount at a time. You can always make it and build it up more. Just dipping in and out of different colors, bark. The kind of the silhouette of the tree could have a little bit of extra shape. And the branches on the left-hand side, so right-hand side could have a tiny bit more darker starting points because they're more in a shadow. Try again, vary the heaviness of them. As the light might be traveling around the branches and suddenly picking them up, creating a shadow, or maybe the opposite then disappearing. Quite like this nice dark branch. Okay, so it's looking a little bit lonely on its own. So maybe it will have little sub branches or some other branches coming across. Okay, maybe just this side is enough for the moment. Let's build up some nice darkness on the left-hand side. Doesn't matter which side you would have started. Okay. So something heavy further on the left to balance our dark tree. Which branch is going on top of the other? Let's make that one exaggerate its darkness. Now the other one's maybe paler there. We'll start being heavier this side. Keep dipping in and out of different colors on your palette. So close together branches might have slightly different shadows. That will create extra variety. And on the left-hand side of the branches, sorry, of the tree, we're going to have the branches paler. So if these ones go into more into the silhouettes, these ones got a bit more light on them first before they get extra darkness. Okay, maybe some buds opening up. So by creating tiny bit more dark and tiny bit more lighter tones within the branch, we show its direction, how it's turning. We show the space and those little knots and gentle curves. Again, just show it's early spring, maybe before the first leaves are appearing. Maybe it's time of the year when the classic in Russia, kind of Eastern European countries, that's where the rivers, the ice is starting to move on the rivers. So it's still quite cold, but the sunshine creates that warmth. Okay, I really like those 3 branches here across. Okay, I need to be careful not to overwork shapes, maybe suggestive lines. Okay, dotted. Less is more. We can always add things to our branches. Kind of make priorities. Step back, look back. Are we still seeing that diagonal across over the whole range of the branches? Try not to pick up all of them, all these fine little things. Just support your existing big shapes. It might be very tempting to do a lot of them. And just keep working on that range, that big range of shapes and varieties. Okay, I've got some branches which are appearing, disappearing, but not telling the exact story of the same following, kind of the branch followed from top to bottom. Right, I'm quite happy with the amount of the branches here, maybe a tiny bit of something paler on this side. Just breaking. So if we're spotting some of the elements looking a bit more similar, parallel too much, that's the time to add or make changes, or add a little extra variations. Right, I think I'm almost done. I think I might just put tiny bit more darker tones on the bottom top just to get that diagonal even further low. So maybe just getting some of these lines tiny bit more exaggerated just at the ends, and maybe something tiny bit more exaggerated that side as well. I think I've finished. I think I'm quite happy with that freshness of the strokes and the dynamics of the branches, so I'm going to stop at this.